Hello everyone, Derek Floyd here, IK Multimedia. Welcome to another edition of DFlo's Audio Toolbox. This is the segment where I interview special guests who seem to use IK tools almost every day to stay creative in their workflow. And if you like what you see here, please hit a like or subscribe so we can get the most updated content to you as soon as it's available. And as always, we like to give away free stuff on every segment. So today we're giving away one of my favorite products because I use all the time. And that is Lurssen Mastering Console. Who needs mastering out there? Me? Yeah. Who knows how to master? I have no clue. But this tool almost does it for you. It's like magic. So who better to break this product down than the man himself? The man with 25 years of mastering experience who put it all into one product to help you get your best song to sound its best. His name is Gavin Lurssen with his partner, Reuben Cohen. Are you guys there today, man? Let's talk about it.
We're out there for you, DFlo.
Hey, great to see you guys. You guys stay out of trouble?
Somehow. Not entirely. Just about 50-50 on that one.
Are you washing hands? You stay away from this COVID madness?
We are so far successfully staying away from it. We've got a lot of protocols in place. We've got, wow, it's just too many to list, but we are running a tight ship around this thing. And so far, you know, we've had one client whose wife was a casualty of this, and that's very sad. But out of all the clients we had and all the people we work with, it's one so far. So we're running clean. Our crew has been in good shape. It's just been a tough one, but we're plowing through it.
Well, you heard it first here. Yep. Lurssen Mastering is getting it done. So if you still got to get your tracks done, they're open, they're safe, and they're taking care of all the precautions. So don't leave these guys out here. You know, I hear a lot about my musicians friends out there that are just struggling. So it's good to know you guys are still working. That's what's most important.
Yeah.
The irony is that nobody, you know, we're pretty much always working around the clock, and nobody comes in so much anymore. So because we have clients from all over the country, all over the world for that matter. So wow. the era of the attended session every day is long gone. It's been that way for a long time, well before COVID. So for us, we've been very fortunate because our daily haven't really changed all that much.
That's awesome, man. That is so good to know.
What
were you gonna say, Gavin?
Mixers, you know, same with mixers. It's you know, everybody's working remotely now, and you know, with technology the way it is, there were so many people doing overdubs all around the world and mixing and doing all this stuff that it's kind of more of the same. You know, it's interesting that it's gone like that. But you know, it's kind of also one of those things that I've noticed where nobody ever really comes in anymore. But now that that's been taken away, people want to come in. You know, it's that kind of human thing that happens. But what we find is that when we do sessions with audio movers and Zoom, it's actually like you're there because you get real-time, you know, audio that we're working on that you can sit there and listen to in your own environment. The only difference is you're not on our speakers and our converters and all that stuff, but real-time music, and we get to really have fun and have a back and forth on Zoom, and we run both of those things, and it's like we're there. So we're doing a session like that tomorrow, actually. Yeah.
Well, that's what makes it so unique. That's what times have changed, and you guys have rolled with the cusp of time and made these changes, which is why we're kind of talking today. You guys have been always on the cusp of technology, so it's been great to see what you've done. And we wanted to give a little bit of history about you both of you, Gavin and Reuben, and then how you built some of the products you built with us, and then where you're going. So we're going to have a couple of the questions, but I wanted to really want people to understand where you come from and why you are where you are and how successful you are, which is important to us. So if me just start with Gavin, just to kind of get things off, and I'll go back and forth to Reuben and Gavin a little bit more, but let me get Gavin that first question, which is, you know, you were a Berklee alumni, which is, you know, woo. And I always wondered how that experience with you shaped your love for music and your passion for what you do.
Well, it's tied into what we were talking about right before you posed that question. So you said we're right on the cusp of technology and all that. And it's interesting because all of this is tied together, and all of this leads to the product, the LMC that we made for IK Multimedia with you guys, that we're very proud of. So when I was at Berklee, I learned that when you're working on music, you're living in the moment. You're always living in the moment. It's a great meditation. It's a great training to live in the moment. But you always have to make sure to keep up with what's going on in technology. And I was at Berkeley at a time when, you know, the history of technology and the history of music was at a certain era, and we were moving forward, and some technology came forward while I was a student at Berkeley, and we embraced it as students. So I kind of went into my career with that mindset of just having been taught to keep up. And you know, for instance, when I was referring to how we're running sessions now on Zoom and Audio Movers, which is made by a company called Listen To, and great props to them. It's somebody in Eastern Europe, I think, who came up with this software. It's like $4 a month or $10 a month. It's something very inexpensive, and it allows you to just be together all around the world in real time. You know, Zoom as well. Zoom really got some legs during this whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
And now,
if you bought stock in Zoom now, buddy, you'd be rich. Whoop.
Even right now, we're on this Zoom thing together. You know, so 20 years ago, I was still active in my career at that time. Back then, I've been at this 29 years now. There was nothing like this. We were carrying around what we called SneakerNet. We were carrying around hard drives, 1 gigabyte hard drives with SCSI connectors from room to room, walking them, SneakerNet. So, you know, so I think, you know, as we look forward and as we every single day take evaluation of this, when we first started designing the product for you guys, people were saying, oh, you're going to put yourself out of business. What are you doing that for? And my attitude and Reuben's attitude was always, hey, you know, first of all, there's a lot of people that just don't have the means to work with us. And we are always about the underdog. We're always about independent artists, indie musicians, people that, you know, whatever their situation is, they don't have the means to come in. So we come up with a product for them, which extends our reach into the community further as thought leaders and audio experts and that sort of thing, people with a lot of experience that know how to do this. But, you know, even from the worst case scenario, which is if you put out software that can cannibalize yourself, you may as well do it, otherwise somebody else will. And that's the very nature of technology. Technology moves forward. Do you want to be a part of the game, or do you want to exclude yourself and refuse to be in the game? It's about being in the game of it. So it's a philosophical mindset and a spiritual mindset that we use, that we put into our career and our mindset. I learned that from Berkeley, and it culminates every single day. And in our case, we've got a product with you guys. We work
so much more, and
we're always busy. You know, there's plenty to go around. We're happy about that. So I don't know if that directly addresses your question, but
that was a very full-blown answer with lots of great details in there. So I appreciate that.
It displays a mindset and why we are where we are in that mindset.
Yeah. You know? Well, here's just an interesting question, just simple. When did you discover your art for mastering? When did you discover your passion for that? Was that something you always knew you would do when you were younger, or did you discover that much later?
So I graduated from Berkeley in 1991, and my parents were living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And so I convinced my mom to lend me her car to go and check out L.A. She never got the car back, but hopefully I've made up for that in other ways. But I packed my futon mattress, about 100 cassette tapes, my Martin D28 acoustic guitar, and two black garbage bags full of clothing. And with that I moved out to LA, and I decided, with a degree in film scoring, which is essentially a degree in composition with some technical abilities in working in film scoring studios, in studios capturing film scores. I decided what I wanted was a job in the music business, and I linked up with a friend out here in LA within 2 weeks of I moved out here, but I wasn't settled in any type of place or anything, parking on couches and so forth. I only knew a couple of people. There's no cell phones, no internet, pay phones, stuff like that.
Wow.
And and so very graciously and generously, a friend of a friend told me that they'd applied for a job with Doug Sachs and didn't get it, and that I should try out for it. So I went and dropped off my resume with Doug, and that day got hired as a runner, somebody picking up a sandwich, sweeping the floors. And I kind of looked around and poked around his facility, and I thought, hey, I can do this. But it was a long haul from there. But ultimately what I'm saying is I landed in a facility and then realized within that facility and that time period that I related to the process of what they were doing. And from there, I took it and been in it ever since.
Wow. So you were just a runner getting started. You went to get your feet wet, and all of a sudden you discovered there was this whole world of the music industry that you didn't realize. You were in film score, but now all of a sudden you feel this process happening. You're like, I can do that. I can get involved with that.
Well,
and Reubens, I know you're sitting there. What exposed you to the art of mastering before you just jumped in with Gavin, or did Gavin was the first person to kind of bring you in?
With my story is similar to Gavin's in the sense that Gavin did bring me into the mastering side of things, certainly. I was a teenager. I was 18. I moved to Hollywood from Santa Barbara. I went to MI, Musicians Institute, and started learning about recording. I knew that I wanted to get into production. I was only 18, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I don't think you really do at that age. I mean, you certainly think you do.
You think you do, but you have no idea.
There's no question. You absolutely think you do. You've got it all figured out for sure. I think I wanted to either be in a rock band or a producer. I didn't know enough about mastering at the very beginning to know that I wanted to do it, and I think Gavin knew that too. He told me that, in fact. He told me my first few weeks, he said, I don't know that anybody on the planet knows that they want to get into mastering until you're a little further down the road, because how can you? It's such a it's a very commonly misunderstood process. It has some there's a romantic aspect to the fact that you're around music and musicians. So I think that attracts a lot of people initially to the idea that they might want to become a mastering engineer, but it really does require at least a couple of years of just getting your toes in the water just at the beginning to really have an idea of what might attract you to the process, just the process of itself, in and of itself. So that's how it was for me. I just loved being in the studio. I loved being around the record making process. I just loved the vibrancy of being around the musicians and how they were, the first few years was really just picking up sandwiches and making sure everything was tidy and ready for client sessions, similar to what Gavin was saying. But
which is still very important. People miss that too. That's very important. It's all about the client experience, right, guys? The client experience is top notch.
It's not only very, very important for the client, but it's also very important for you to learn how to interact with clients, how to serve them, even with something as simple as a sandwich. It was actually not that simple, especially when you're dealing with 5 sandwich orders and Hollywood traffic. So it's actually just as difficult to get that right as anything else. If you can succeed in those waters and do that 100 times in a row and then have a really good batting average, you're probably going to be trusted with other things. So there's really good lessons. We can talk for a whole hour on that, but generally when I was
I get you.
I think actually it was even within a couple of years of just being in the room and being occasionally trusted to actually have my hands on the board too early on, I would get chills. I would get a certain energy back that was very, very addictive and appealing, that created a scenario where I just didn't want to leave, So it's then that over and over again, fast forward into present day, it hasn't changed actually. I still get those chills.
That's awesome,
that's what,
man.
That's what drives me.
So now knowing that you guys, of course, have been together for many years, but pivoting back to Gavin for a minute, when you were actually in the business and you started working and you said, I'm going to do this as a job, how did you get your name out there as an engineer? I mean, because there wasn't the internet as strong as it is now. So, how did you find work to get yourself established as a mastering engineer?
It is interesting how that works. In the 90s, I was working pretty heavily with a lot of like I would say punk bands and heavy hard rock bands. And there were a couple of labels that it was at the time when independent labels were getting their footing. It's not like it is now. It was a different thing. They were bigger than the indie labels now, but smaller than the major labels. And so, because I was at a facility that had a certain reputation, and Doug was at the tail end of his Well, he still was active for quite some time, but he was slowing down. He didn't want to take all the work, so he would put me with various key people that then word of mouth would spread. It's all about word of mouth. So I dealt with these labels, and one thing led to another, and there were some specific mixers and producers that would then, through the word of mouth, hear about me. And this was at the time when everybody was still in studios. People weren't really working at home yet so much. And there was a guy named Jerry Finn who sort of locked on to me, and he had mixed Green Day's Dookie album, so he had quite a profile at a very young age. And then, so I was working with bands like Blink-182 at the time, and we did some work with Green Day, and that stuff sort of puts you on the profile list. And then I had a little health scare, so I was gone for 2 weeks, and I came back to nothing, crickets, and it was this amazing phenomenon, and then it started to build up again from that, as it does, because people know you, and then I got a call from T-Bone Burnett, and he had heard about me. I think he had been floating around looking for a facility to be comfortable in. He wanted to be a regular client of somebody and get to know them and work with them that way. And he had this. This was probably the year 2000 at this point, or maybe slightly before then. And he said, "Hey, I just worked on this movie, and it's all self-financed, and there's no real budget for it, and can you just put this record together for us, and we're going to shop it and just see if we can get some attention on it. It's a Coen Brothers film, and it's called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it spans 80 years of music, and it really has to be put together in a very specific way because we don't want modern, loud-sounding stuff, and we don't want the old-fashioned stuff to sound too old. We need to find some place for this all." And I listened to all these directives. He's a very thoughtful guy. He's an incredible producer. Just knows exactly what he's doing. And I really understood where he was coming from. So I put the record together for him from analog tape, mixed by Mike Piersante, another genius. And he was young too, up and coming. We were both in that place. I think it was before I met Reuben. Yeah, you weren't there for that yet, Reuben, right?
That's right.
And we put it together. It became, I think so far it's sold 17 million copies. It won a Grammy for Album of the Year. Wow. So I was a part of that, thankfully. That was my first Grammy.
So that would you call that your first big break, kind of, sort of? Because I was going to ask the question, what was your first big break that put you on the map? It sounds like that was the one.
It was, and it was, there was that heavy metal hard stuff, which then started to, the industry of that started to thin out a little bit, and that kind of music started to thin out a little bit. But then once T-Bone and I got together, there's another side to the story as well. I'll just be quick about that because I don't want to take all the time here. But so that kind of set a trajectory, and people got to know that, and everybody wanted to sound like that. And a lot of these people that were going for loud, they heard that album and they go, "Oh, it doesn't have to be loud. It can be good instead of loud." And you stop squashing those peaks down, let those peaks go and the dynamics go. And now all of a sudden the music sounds lush and blooming. So we found ourselves on that record on the cusp, and as an influencer, as a facility that helped change the industry to some degree in terms of people realizing you don't have to just smash everything. But I will say this as well. Early on in my career, in the 90s, Jackson Browne, legendary American singer-songwriter, he's a very particular guy and a wonderful human, and he likes to take his time to explore options, many options. And just through timing and right place, right time, I was the guy he would spend all this time with, day and night in the studio. And a lot of people around the industry saw him with his confidence in me as a young audio professional. And because he had his confidence in me, they would put his confidence in me. And so I credit him in large part to people, professionals in the industry looking at me with confidence And I think it makes him, I'm not sure he likes me to credit him that way, because he's helped so many people get started, and he's just one of those guys. And I have tremendous respect for him, and I have a lot of gratitude towards him. He's still a friend, and he still works with us today. 29 years in, I'm still working with him. And I met him when he was younger than me, so than I am now, younger than I am now. So,
I love that.
That combined, you know, it just puts you forward, and then you're working every day, you know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to pivot to Reuben for a second, because you brought up something that I've always wondered until I got to meet you guys and really learned about mastering. I always was told, or I understood, mastering just meant you got it louder and you got it radio ready. It never talked to me about dynamics and expression. You guys taught me that. And I thought, okay, what does mastering really do? And I thought, well, what is the main goal of mastering in general? And Reuben, can you answer that? When you get a track or you get a song, your main goal isn't to make it louder. What is its main goal?
Level is tied to dynamic content, and dynamic content is tied to how we perceive things and bring things in emotionally. So getting something loud is certainly not the first thing on our minds. It kind of happens by default along the way often, but that has everything to do with how the mix is presented. So sometimes the mix is already up to level, in which case we'll basically come in exactly where we were. Where we started. It's pretty rare, because a lot of times mixing engineers understand that if they mix to a certain point where they can give us a little room to work with, not that much, but a little bit, oftentimes you'll end up in a better place, because you'll end up to level and ready for prime time, ready for radio, ready for release on all the platforms, in a place that feels more natural. And what does that mean? That means you're going to connect with the music a little bit more. So the end game, where we're really what we're trying to achieve is ultimate connection with that music between the fan and the listener, or with the listener and the artist. If you can create that connection in its ultimate way, and you have ultimate connection, then you've done the best job you can do. So level can either be working with you or against you in that place, and understanding exactly where to put something level-wise, and really, really get that just nailed, is going to create an end result where you feel most connected to it. So that's what we go for, and it's always different depending on what you're working on. Every mix is its own signature thumbprint. Every batch of mixes is its own signature thumbprint, and it's a bit of like a chess game every day. It's trying to figure out exactly how to position this little puzzle, and it's easy for us to do because we're so familiar with this process, just to get it just nailed, and then there's just nothing in the way. You can just fully feel like you're on this journey with this musical piece, and then you're done. That's what you want to do. So people are often understand mastering to be two things: the corrective process, in other words, what's wrong with this mix, and what do we do at this point to correct something, and get to level. And that's maybe just a small fraction of the things that go through our mind as we're fine-tuning something in the mastering process. It's just more about everything else I mentioned.
I love the fact that the both of you, and I know, Gavin, you've taught Reuben, almost everything he knows as he's run with you, but it's about connecting with the song. It's about when you put that song on, that you get an emotional attachment when you hear it, like all the things move and ebb and flow. It's not that it's just smashed in your face, it's just loud. You want to breathe with the dynamics of the song, and that's what I've learned from you guys over time, and when you just explain that. So as I tell people who get LMC, or even talk about mastering, even when they buy T-Racks, things of that nature, I try to explain to them, just don't get it loud. Just don't press the brick wall limiter button. Go in and listen to the dynamics of the song. Find the places where you want that person to connect with. That's what Gavin and Reuben would do. They would find the parts of the song that say, hey, bring this up, move this down, move this to the left, to the right. And it opens up the song, so to speak, right? And you need room for that, right, guys?
Well, when you mix, can I just interject here? I don't know if you addressed that to Reuben or not.
Yeah.
But so the intention of the mixer, the intent of the mixer is really what we have the responsibility of overseeing and presenting back to the mixer, to the producer, to the artist, and ultimately to the fans. And sometimes they don't really know the mystery of what it is we're doing. So we have even a more responsibility to give them something back that's going to serve their fans. Because ultimately, once they're done with their job, they don't want to be thinking about it. They want to just know that we're nailing this down. So the mixer who mixes that dynamic range and the peaks and the valleys and the peak to average ratio, the highest peak and the lowest dip, that mixer's intent is already set. So if we come in and we push down the highest peak to therefore push up the average level and make the track louder so it can compete with other tracks, we've now destroyed the intent of the mixer. So if this comes up in conversation, and this is the strategy, and it's agreed upon and discussed before we do the work, then sure, you've got a case. And at that moment, what our responsibility becomes is to squash those peaks down and deliver back something in a responsible way. So what's built into the LMC, which came from our console, is if you're running a song and you start to feel the intent of that mixer, and we have to get something a little bit louder so it can compete with something, what we'll do with our levels is we'll follow the dynamic range of the music. So for instance, if a compressor is pushing down those peaks, when the music relaxes and those peaks are gone, that compressor will actually release more. So what we have to do is we have to reduce the input level in order to maintain that mixer's intent, so that even though we're getting louder, we're pushing that average level up because those peaks are compressed. The lower parts of the song remain lower, and that intent of the mixer remains intact. And this is something very important to us that we do on the fly on our console manually as we are doing a capture, because we're working in the analog domain. What we built into the LMC with the automation function is the ability to get some compression, raise it up if you need it, but really think it out if you need it before you just do it for the sake of it. And then through some automation, you can come down for those low parts. So now you've got a compressed file, an ability to raise, but still following the way that the mix blooms. So that's something to consider.
Let's dive into that, and let's talk a little bit about why you guys created LMC in the first place. You guys, like you already said earlier, you were on the cusp of technology, always making sure you're staying with things, and you decide, I'm going to create my console in software form. Whose idea was that, and how did that get started?
That came about, I originally started to talk to Dave Kersner about that. He was one of the, I guess, founding members of IK Multimedia, he was there at the very beginning. We talked about it for many years. I've known Dave for many years. And I think for me personally, and maybe Reuben's got a different approach on it, but you know, there's so many people that just could not come in and have the means to work with us. They either cannot afford it, or they just maybe their timing or the location they are in the world, you know, particular countries people live in, it's just not an option to come in and visit with us. So we wanted to take what we are and just spread it out a little further into the world of music makers. So it was kind of a pure-hearted attempt at that. And beyond that, there really wasn't another intent. You know, and obviously it's exciting to, you know, be at the forefront of technology, and we created something unique and something that hasn't been done, and that's exciting, you know. So yeah, it's just kind of a pure thing for me in my heart that I wanted to put out there, you know. And nice. And it keeps us established as thought leaders and
sure,
audio experts, and we've got something special with this console. I mean, if you look at the records that have gone through both of these consoles, there's something pretty special about it.
It's got some history, you know? There, man. It's got some mojo going on.
Wanted to put it out there, you know. I don't know if Reuben's got a different take than I do.
Rubes, what do you think? Why Lurssen Mastering Console?
There's a lot of tools out there, and they're very confusing for a lot of people, especially for people that don't really have a good grasp on what the possibility and the potential of these tools can bring. So we wanted to create something that was very intuitive, and the mantra that we were kind of talking about was Instagram for audio. Because when you pull up Instagram or one of these photo correcting plugins or processes, it's very, very intuitive. You know, I could kind of teach my grandmother how to do that very quickly, right? But if I were to stick her in front of one of these more complex tools for mastering, she wouldn't know. Maybe even, you know, most people wouldn't even know what to touch first. So what we do a lot of the times is, or most of the time, is how we approach music. It has everything to do with the mix at hand. So we wanted to create a process and a plugin that was going to really, really be driven by whatever is being fed into it, and let that be the thing that dictates your decisions. And a lot of that was removing a lot of the controls and a lot of the buttons and knobs, taking away so much that can lead you down a path that is going to create diminishing returns. And you'd only know this once you kind of know how we work. So the way we work, and this kind of follows what Gavin was saying a few minutes ago in terms of how far to push something. So level is equal to density. You know, the denser you have your mix in terms of how much compression and how much dynamic squeeze you have on the individual elements in a mix, generally allows you to achieve more level in the end, because you don't have to do as much processing in terms of that squeeze on the bus. It's already done in the elements of the mix. In other words, all you have to do is just a little bit more, and all of a sudden it really blooms forward. Now, that could be what you're looking for in a particular situation, and something else entirely in another situation. If you're dealing with an arrangement that is more maybe Americana, like, you know, Oh Brother Where Art Thou is a good example, where you have these elements with the mix that are not so heavily compressed musically. They need to have a particular openness to them emotionally and musically, and that is what the music calls for. So not achieving so much level is entirely appropriate for that type of arrangement versus maybe a denser hip hop or EDM type of arrangement where you can, it's part of the sound to achieve more level. Now, one is not better than the other. It's kind of apples and oranges at that point. They're both great, and they both should be that way for the musical content. The LMC is designed to be able to do all of the above and everything in between, depending on how you run it.
So we've talked about the console. When I think of the GUI, I think of how amazing that looks, just like the console where you are right there. But there's some big knobs that are there. There's a left input knob, and I forget what the other knob is on the right side of the button. It looks like the console. What do those knobs actually do? Gavin, can you tell me?
Those big knobs are a very important part of the gain structure of how we go from one piece of gear into the other. So, for instance, very commonly will come out of the digital to analog converter, because we're working with mixes that we will convert and then do the analog processing and then reconvert back to digital. So, so what we have to do is we have to come out of a digital to analog converter, which is clocked individually, and also goes through an interface, which then the combination of those three elements gives us our analog gain staging and conversion. So, what happens is it'll go directly from that converter into, let's say, oftentimes a tube equalizer, and this is on the LMC this way actually. From the tube equalizer, it will then go into the console. And those big knobs are 1 dB stepped attenuators. So from the equalizer into the console, we'll actually drop it a dB a lot of times, and then it goes into a solid state equalizer, and then into various other limiters of choice, you know, whatever is needed. And the combination of hitting that tube limiter a little hotter and then dropping a dB into the solid state limiter is something that really offers a lot of punch, but still that tubey cool feeling. And then at the end of that, the whole chain, we might put a de-esser, which allows us to then open up that tube equalizer a little more, give some more of that saturation, that cool tube openness, and then we're pushing down that harsh, high and brittle stuff with the de-esser, using as a high frequency limiter, and that allows us to put all kinds of components in between the chain, all kinds of EQs, limiters, whatever you want to do on top of that kind of vibe play, which will then, as Reuben pointed out earlier, make it sound like we were never there. Make it sound like you've got a great connection between that song and that listener. And it just shows how much can be done in our environment to just bring you closer to that song, offer that depth of field, offer that blooming, and offer that kind of stuff. So the big knobs are there to help us with our gain structure in creating a sound that blooms it open, and that's built into the LMC. And you can also adjust the output gain. If you go to the top right corner of the plugin and you look at the actual chain that you've selected by whichever preset you're choosing and which components are in that chain, you can adjust the output gain, the output level of that track, and then you're working that against the input level. So you can experiment by bringing one up and one down and working both off of each other as to how to affect that push. Once you use that push knob to select all frequencies and move that front end tube equalizer, that gain structure could be the difference between something a little brighter, something a little darker, without actually adjusting any EQ. So if getting that gain structure correct is pretty crucial, and just using one's ear is the best way to do that. And we've put all of that, that thought of what the big knobs are, that 2BQ into the solid state EQ, it's all built into this. So you don't have to do any of the thinking. All you have to
I
really
love
do,
that you did it all for me, because I understand some of it, and some of it's like way over my head, and LMC does that for me. That's what's the great thing about it, because it knows what I don't know.
And also what you can do, if you really feel like you're just not in the zone with it, leave that input gain at 0 and work with the output gain and just get that, you know. And then once you're there and you feel good about that, then experiment with that a little bit. Maybe drop it a dB, maybe raise it a dB. Never need to go more than a dB or 2 on that stuff. You know, less is more always. But we put the thinking in it for you, you know.
I love it. So answering that question then, you guys also built a ton of presets. And I know Reuben mentioned it and you mentioned it, that there are presets that are genre specific. How did you guys come up with the presets? How did that come together?
The reason that those presets are there is because a lot of the times, if you're working on a hip hop track, hip hop would just be the thing that you want to start with, or at least be the thing that you want to start with and then try to beat by using something else as a second option. Because the reason being is with hip hop, EDM, R&B, you know, those types of genres generally have a whole lot of very precise bass. Now, I'm talking about more contemporary hip hop and R&B. Maybe some more classic R&B, certainly not. Maybe you'd actually want to do something more like an Americana or a pop rock setting, which has the compressor that's added in the signal path that absorbs more transients. So the good thing about absorbing transients is that you can get a whole bunch of body and bloom and expansion. The bad thing about adding that type of compression in your signal chain is that you'll sacrifice overall impact and punch sometimes. In other words, the nose of the transient, the original hit, the original attack of that transient, because of the compression, might get absorbed, and you'll get more sustain and tail end and release of that. That's where you're going to get the bloom, but you'll be missing on the punch and the attack. That's where you'll start getting you'll have less of that. So for something that's really hard hitting, EDM, hip hop, maybe not have that type of compression in the signal path and start with an EDM or a hip hop setting. But if you want to start digging into compression and having more of an absorption, which may be less aggressive type genres or aggressive type mixes in terms of overall hype and compression, those types of presets might lend itself better to those types of arrangements for those reasons. So that's kind of the first thing to go off. And there's many presets. You know, metal is a little different. Metal has a little more of a tweak on the compression to allow for a little bit more low lows and high highs. You know, a little bit more splashy cymbals, a little more tight bottom kick, because that's kind of a lot of times what works for metal. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of times. So those are the reasons, if that answers your question.
Well, that's a lot. You know, I think as I've used LMC forever now, since you guys came to me early on. It is my go-to at the end of my channel. So I've learned to know what knobs feel right for me. I, like you said, I use my ears. If it feels like it's where I want to be, that's where I go. But it gets me there faster than anything else. So just as I'm talking to you guys, subscribers, as you're talking about things you use, and there's so many different mastering plugins out there, and you use the one that makes sense and it gets you there faster, and that helps you get to your end result. And Lurssen Mastering Console is going to be one of those that's going to really do the trick. And you're talking about years of experience built into the product itself. So I know they talked about a lot of the different things that are happening behind the scenes, but LMC does most of that for you. So I definitely challenge you guys to download the demo today as you listen to the interview today, and check it out, because I think it's going to blow your mind, especially using the presets that are already there. You're getting Reuben and Gavin's knowledge and wealth of knowledge of years of mastering products that are giving you a great starting point. It's not the end all, but it's a great starting point to get you able to get into your mix right away and get you a sound that's pleasant to your ear, not just harsh, not just loud, but actually pleasant. Right, guys?
Yeah, and in your case, your music is like pop, gospel. Like, how would you describe your genre of music?
Yes, I would say gospel pop rock, somewhere in that space.
So pop rock. So what preset do you like to use on the LMC?
Believe it or not, I use a hip hop one and I use an R&B one on my stuff because of the way it brings the bass out.
So what you're choosing is presets that don't include a tube limiter so much, so a more punchy setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool.
I like it to really hit kind of hard.
Yeah, there you go. So that's, you know, you can use hip hop on gospel pop, you know?
Yep. And it works like, and like you said, I went through a bunch of presets and I found what my ear liked. It wasn't that I stayed with the one that was assigned to my genre. It's like you guys said, Reuben, you find the one and you could put Americana on a pop or whatever. Whatever your ears are pleasant to, that's what makes LMC so wonderful. I can just go through and choose and get a great starting point, which was awesome.
The other day, what I like to do oftentimes when deciding that, you can literally go between one set, preset to the other without changing the gain structure. But oftentimes what I'll do right in Pro Tools or any DAW is I'll just duplicate the whole channel with the LMC already on it, and I'll get happy with one setting, and then for the other I'll just do something slightly different because maybe I want to audition between hip hop and pop rock, right? Hip hop would be a little bit more punchy, as we just talked about, and then pop rock might be a little less punchy but more, you're absorbing things, so that therefore you might want to EQ a little different to compensate for that difference. So that's quite a few moves different, and you get happy in both places, and now you're able to A/B between both roads and figure out which one is best. And it might be both great, and it's completely subjective, but what you're going off at that point is listen for more than just 2 seconds. Listen for 30 seconds. Listen for a whole minute, or maybe the whole song, and really feel it. And which one makes you feel more connected to it? Those are the things to go off of, and then that's what should be dictating your decisions.
Speaking of going to the next level and advancing, you guys did such a great job with LMC on the Mac and PC. You took it to an iPad. Wow, that was pretty incredible. Whose idea was that to take it to an iPad? What made you think of that?
It was kind of a joint idea with everybody. You know, we're always looking forward to figuring out how to, up the game, and we wanted to take it to the car. I don't know, Reuben, did you originally come up with that idea? Is that your?
Well, yeah, the thing was that, in the 15 years ago when I started, one of my responsibilities assisting sessions was to make CDs for the car. We used to use an Alison Masterlink, and as we were
I remember Masterlink. Yeah.
Did you see the way he looked over? He actually looked at the one we used.
It's not really used all that often anymore, but back in the day, it was used every day, and it would have to be queued up and ready to hit record because we would have a split feed, one to the actual digital recorder on the computer, and the other one to the Masterlink. So that clients could listen in their car, in their own environment that they were familiar with. Because it sounds great in the studio to everybody always, because we've got beautiful speakers, but it's a new environment to them. So they might think that they like something, but they're not familiar with this environment because it's new to them. It's not new to us, but it's new to them. So we send them out to the car, and now they know exactly what they're hearing because that's their familiar environment. So we found that was so important to people that why should they have the ability to do this with the LMC? So one of the features that we implemented was being able to fine-tune your decisions in the studio, export those settings, export the mix, import it into your iPhone very easily, into your car, your iPhone or your iPad, fine-tune in there, export those settings, and now you're back in the studio. So it eliminates this guess and check type of scenario, and
which is just friggin' brilliant, because we've all done the car test. So this is brilliant.
And you can take it even further in the car. You can plug it into anything. You can listen on a PA in a venue.
Yeah.
You can
it's brilliant.
Somebody
I was just, I thought it was brilliant from the beginning. So I was so glad when you guys put it to the iPad. I'm like, how killer is that? That was just a smart move. Smart move, guys. Well, we've talked a little bit about LMC, and it definitely that's been part of your legacy. But now you're moving forward. Like Gavin and I were talking earlier. There's more happening now. The technology is moving forward, and you guys are evolving into another new space. You're actually going to be talking about some things online with Lurssen Mastering YouTube channel, right? What's going on there?
Sure. Well, we just wanted a venue or a platform to be able to express all our philosophy and ideas, and to just educate people in the value of what can be really, really realized in the mastering process, more than most would probably think. And especially now that people are making records at home more and more music's being made out in the world than ever in all of history, and I can only foresee it only increasing that way, that this knowledge needs to be shared and ideas need to be shared. So that's what the intention is, to just bring a community together all around the ideas that we share around mastering, and spread the love and the words of wisdom, hopefully.
It's very important that I think in any industry that the thought leaders of that industry share what they have. And I think that everybody is a thought leader. Everybody. And particularly in an industry, because the tools are so readily available, so affordable, and everybody's got them. And you either go to college and come out as a full-fledged record producer or whatever your title is, You know, I just think in our position in the industry, which is one of profile, and a lot of experience and a lot of records under our belt and in our wheelhouse, that, you know, it's important to put that out there. It's good for business for a studio like ours to be at the forefront of putting that knowledge out for us, but it's also good for the industry. It's like a give-take cycle. And I spend so much time doing volunteer work through various organizations like the Recording Academy and various others, that I just found that spending time with one-on-one with people, they were so fixated on wanting to know what we knew. And when I go to NAMM and AES and I do presentations for, you know, IK and with you out there, there's so many people that they're so hungry for knowledge because the products are out there. I just think it makes for a healthier industry to really get out there and talk and pulsate and be a part of the fabric of the community, and everybody sharing ideas. You know, the people that are entry level just coming in, the people that have experience, and you put these ideas forward, and our YouTube channel is a way of doing that because it's an interaction. It's not us spewing our stuff. It's hearing from people as well, which is great, you know.
You know, I was going to say, it's just neat that I've watched the two of you over the years that I've known you, and everything about the two of you and what you do with your music is always about giving back and giving back to the artist, giving back to the music. It's never a take. You're always givers. You know, when you guys have an artist in the studio, you're giving it out, you're making sure they're comfortable, you're taking care of their needs. It's the service aspect of it. And then you built LMC with all the wisdom and knowledge you've done over the years. You put it in a product that gives people access to what you know. And now you've taken one step further and said, here I am on a YouTube channel. You can actually interact with me. You can watch the content, put your responses back, and interact with people that are out there. So I just see it as a wonderful way of you two continuing what you already do, which is give back to the community and like you said, stay thought leaders and go forward with what's going on in technology. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, giving is receiving. You know, the more you give, the more you receive, and taking is a different thing. Taking is an unsustainable act. So we love to do that. You know, we're blessed. Look at us. Look where we're sitting. You know, we do this every day. You know, our abundance is with us. So we gotta give. We have to. It's the way the community works. It's the way that everybody stays healthy on the planet. You know.
So with all the two of you have done now, you've done so much. You know, what's next for Team Lurssen now that you got the YouTube channel? Is there something coming after that? Are there some projects we should be looking for to be able to support you guys out there?
I think that endeavors like the LMC that we did with you guys, the YouTube channel, while we're fixated on putting our attention on it now, because everything we get involved in, we give all of our attention. So while that's all consuming right now, everything you do is a precursor to whatever comes next. And you even pointed it out with your words in some ways. I think what I would like to see for the future is some kind of AI endeavors in calculating curves of music and being involved in the development of that. You know,
that's cool.
See where that goes. See where that goes, because you gotta be at the front line of everything that's going to come up. And I think if you look at the way music is distributed and consumed, and the monetization and the economic structure of the way music is consumed and distributed, it only makes sense that the people creating music are going to go down that road, and it has to be one of quality. And you know, people will come across right now in today's world in 2020 and say, hey, you know, this is not good yet, and we shouldn't do this, don't get involved. But everything has to start. There always has to be step one, and step one is never going to be this perfect scenario. Year's end is going to be. So dive into that, bring the professionals together, bring everybody together to create something that's going to be good in that. You know, don't try to hold on to what it is you do. There's abundance in what we do. We're lucky we do this every day. It's not going to go away. But be a part of what that's going to come. I don't know if Reuben has the same feeling, but that's fine.
Reuben, where's the future for you at Lurssen Mastering?
That we very much a focus on AI, developing technologies, having a focus on how to get the most out of whatever is being fed into the AI. So some new concepts and philosophies in terms of how that could all be done, which we're already taking on. And then also very excited to support this new world of immersive audio and Dolby Atmos, and there's many great technologies out there that have everything to do with object-based audio and which is not channel-based audio as we know in stereo and 5.1, but object-based audio, meaning all around you and not fixated to a particular, not driven by a particular channel, but just in a XYZ sphere, in terms of where you point anything in an XYZ coordinate. So we've developed solutions for mastering in those worlds, which is pretty cutting edge and some might say is a bit of a breakthrough. We're excited about that in terms of releasing that to the world so everybody can participate and learn what we figured out. And
awesome.
So that's in addition to our daily practices of stereo work.
Wow, you guys are super busy, man. So as the subscribers have watched the program, where can they get a hold of you if they want to send their music to be mastered? If they want to get business going with you guys, where do they go?
www.lursenmastering.com.
And everything's there.
Everything's right there.
And the YouTube channel is now, what is it?
It's Lurssen Mastering. The YouTube channel is Lurssen Mastering, and that's easy to find through our website. Type in Lurssen Mastering on the YouTube, it's easy to find.
Yeah,
awesome.
And we support it. We support it using our own individual Instagram and Facebook accounts too.
Nice.
Yeah. So
well, you guys have been such great guests. I really appreciate all the knowledge you've shared with our team, and I know that the people that were listening today got a backdoor history of how Lurssen Mastering came together and why the product is so important and what it means to the future and what it means to you out there. So thank you for taking so much of your time. I really do appreciate it. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this amazing conversation with Gavin and Reuben, walking through history, showing you what it took to really create what Lurssen Mastering is all about. But the most important part is getting to the free stuff, right? Well, now you get a chance to take home all that history in Lurssen Mastering Console yourself. All you got to do is answer the one question for me today. You guys ready? Simple question, super easy. See if you were paying attention. What record did Gavin work on with T-Bone Burnett and he won a Grammy for with T-Bone? It was to a movie. It was a soundtrack. What was the name of that record, that album? If you can name that for me and put that in the comments below, we'll see if you can get Lurssen Mastering today. How about that? So let's see if you paid attention. It was one record he talked about that was actually a soundtrack to a movie, and that was the one that T-Bone Burnett won tons of Grammys on. You want to make sure you can get this record right here. If you got this answer, throw it in the chat. Let's see if you're paying attention. And as always, we look forward to seeing you again at the next DFlo's Audio Toolbox. Let's keep it going for a while, guys, and see if you're there. Take care, guys. Have a great one.